Hey guys, welcome to the Himprovement Podcast, where the mission is to help young men develop their character, identity, and mindset in order to activate their potential and achieve their goals in life. And so on today's episode of Himprovement, we have another special guest. His name is Jevon Wooden. He is an author, speaker, as well as a mindset and perception coach. Welcome to the show, Jevon.
Hey, thank you for having me, Kamani. Appreciate you sharing this platform with me. This is amazing what you're doing. So thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. And so just for the people who aren't familiar with your work, could you give a little bit more detail about your background and what you do?
Sure. So background, I was a soldier for about 12 years in the military, in the Army, specifically in the reserves, deployed 3 times. And, over that time, the course of that time, I realized that I had a gift, right? People would always tell me like, hey, you should be a motivational speaker. You always get people moving. You're able to get people believing in themselves. And I said, okay, that's great, but I don't know if I want to travel around speaking all the time, right? So I stumbled upon life coaching just upon the search, or I said it should say it found me actually. And I actually started Live, Not Loathe, which is my mindset perception coaching company, while I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2017. That's where the idea came from. I actually took a break from coaching and started back earlier this year because I had to go ahead and get my own mindset and perception back right after that deployment. And we can get into that a little more as we go through this conversation.
Okay. And it's good that you're able to realize that. That's definitely important to know that even though you might be teaching this stuff, you can be susceptible to having lapses in it too. It takes maturity to be able to take that step away and to reflect and think about what your mental health needs are or whatever else is going on before you can go and serve others. And so I respect that. And so it's interesting how like you went from a line of work, which I guess people wouldn't really make a connection between that and life coaching, like what you do, but somehow you kind of moved over into that area. Could you give me a little bit more information about that and how you kind of segued into that?
Sure. So by trade, I'm actually a cybersecurity expert. Right, by trade. I still actually do that to this day, right? So coaching, I do 2 things full time. But how I got into coaching from doing like IT and military and all that stuff was just when I work with my soldiers, right? I seen the benefit of speaking to them, speaking positivity into them, of instead of, downgrading them. And you hear about drill sergeant mentality and all that other stuff in the military where you're belittling, berating, they say build you down to bring you up and all that stuff. I didn't believe in that. Right. I always believe that the best way to get people performing top performance is showing your belief and providing support, right? Finding their skills and then honing those skills, right? Instead of having to focus on their weaknesses where they're going to start losing confidence, they're going to have that self-doubt. I focused on building their strengths and finding out, okay, you're good at this. Let's put you here. And then you can cross-train and learn the other skills later, right? To get people comfortable. So that's where the whole mindset thing really spoke to me from, outside of me having to learn it myself over the course of my whole life, right?
Right. Okay. So that makes sense. So pretty much where it seems like it came from is you saw a lack in the leadership that was above you or around you, and you saw that there was something missing in it, that they weren't offering something that was vital to what the soldiers, including yourself, needed to be motivated to do their best. And so seeing that lack is what inspired you to kind of do something that was related to that while you're in the military, coaching up your peers, but then also getting into coaching after that because you saw the importance of how it could affect somebody's psyche and whatnot. Yeah, am I understanding that correctly?
That's spot on, Kamani. That was like well said, brother.
Okay,
I don't think I could have said it better.
I'm just trying to summarize to make sure I'm understanding and make sure that I can go on the right track as we move forward. And it's interesting that you said it actually. And so I wasn't in the actual military, but I kind of can relate to what you're saying. So I went to Texas A&M, and so it's a senior military college. They have a Corps Cadets program there. And so during my time in that, I can definitely relate to what you were talking about because there were plenty of leaders that were lacking in some of those areas, like what you talked about when it came to providing strong motivation as opposed to, I would say, coercion, which is telling somebody do this or else. There were like a select few number of leaders that I came across that were over me and over other people where I could look at them and I could say, wow, this guy really has the formula down for what makes a leader a leader. And, some of those people, I still see them on Facebook, wherever, to this day. And I just have that respect for them, knowing that they were able to take the leadership development opportunities that we had in the organization seriously to where they could get to that level. And so I can definitely agree with you that, having those skills is extremely valuable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I learned that early on, man, because, a lot of people lead with authority, and they always say, like in the military, they say respect the rank. And I never was a firm believer in that, because when you lead with the rank and you're leading by fear, right? People aren't really holding onto your words. They're only doing it because they're afraid of the consequences.
Right.
That's not motivating, right? That's actually demotivating. So I always wanted people to want to do it because they said, hey, I know Jevon would be there by my side. He's going to do the work for me. He's not going to tell me to do anything he wouldn't do himself, right? He's going to help me, show me. I can come to him and say, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And I can feel comfortable enough to share that, or I don't feel confident, right? That's how I always wanted my soldiers to feel, and that's how I want my clients to feel, that they can share anything. They can be vulnerable with me. And my whole platform is vulnerability and strength. Well, people are only going to want to be vulnerable with you if they don't feel judged, right? They don't feel guilty about not knowing, right? These are the things that they need to feel. They need to feel secure. They need to feel safe. So I always tell my clients, like when we start a session, this is your safe space, right? Talk to me about anything. There's no judgment here. And I did the same thing in the military. And I do it in my, in cybersecurity field. When I have subordinates, I always let them know, like, you don't have to worry about not knowing something. That's why you're here. You're here to learn. No one knows everything. I definitely don't know everything, right? So who am I to judge you, right? I am here to help you build into the person you want to be and help you achieve your definition of success.
Yeah, that's great. And that's the way that it should be, because on the other end of things, whenever people use coercion and rank as the main way to get people to do what they need to do, it's really lazy, I would say. It takes no type of self-reflection or awareness or any type of development on that person's part, or really any skill to do something like that, to go on the other end of the spectrum, like what you talk about, where you give them that avenue to where they can express that vulnerability. That helps you to where you can end up getting the best results possible, because you're getting the best, most authentic, raw answers and feedback from your people. You're actually getting the truth. One thing I'll say from my experience is that the ones that led with coercion and the ones that didn't want to, that I guess didn't give you the opportunity to be vulnerable as far as telling them what you do and don't know, it was easy really just to hide it from them and pretend like you were competent in whatever area it was. And then if you were able to BS your way through it, okay, great. They'll never find out. But after the fact, if you did mess up, then it was just even worse, because now you're in a whole different boat, as far as problems. But I can definitely see what you're saying.
Right, man. We see it all the time, right? It's like, man, I can't tell. I messed up. I'm not even gonna tell anyone I did that. Like, hey, they'll find out later when I'm gone. Stuff like that. So instead of, I realized coming up that it's better when you allow people to be honest with you than to show that they can't, right? So if someone comes to me and they tell me they screwed up, I would rather that. I would rather you come and then we talk it out. We nip it in the bud before it grows into a larger issue, as you said, because I've seen that so many times. Like, when I was deployed, I can think of an example. When I was in Kuwait one time, one of the soldiers we were out in the field, and one of the soldiers forgot to put gas in the generator, which powered the satellites, which allowed us to communicate. And we were with what you call the Combat Aviation Brigade. So they were the helicopters, all that rain down hell on the enemies, right? So as you know, the communication is very important. So instead of yelling and barking at the soldier who forgot, we were able to implement solutions. I love this thing called extreme ownership by Jocko Willink. He always talks about extreme ownership. I have to look at, as their leader, what was my part in making that error, right? They could have put the gas, they didn't put the gas in it, but that means some processes that I've implemented were faulty. So that gave me an opportunity to grow as well. So I think more people need to look at it as such. When someone comes to you with an issue, especially as a leader, you say, all right, how can we be better together? Right? This is a learning opportunity. We should do an after action report and then implement whatever lessons learned to the next time so it doesn't happen again. So not only do they grow, but I grow, and now we're better together.
I think that's a good way to look at it. And here's why. Because for one, if you take that mode of, oh, it's not my fault, we can blame it on them, that doesn't change the fact that things still didn't get done. And at the end of the day, if you're the leader of the group, even though you may not have been responsible for that specific part of the process, putting the gas in the generator, at the end of the day, due to the fact that you're the leader, you're still held accountable. And so I think that's a good mindset to get into, to where you say, instead of me pointing the finger to take blame away from myself, you're looking at the fact, okay, at the end of the day, we didn't get the result we want. What can I do as a leader next time, since I'm accountable for the whole thing, to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again? And I think that's the mark of someone that's a good leader, somebody that can take a look at the situation, and despite whether or not, even I'm sure you did everything you were supposed to do. You probably went and did your checkpoints and all that. You probably relayed all the information down the chain of command. But at the end of the day, if somebody has a lapse, somebody has a lapse. But I think that's definitely a good thing to do. And another thing that I had a question about is, do you have kids?
No kids, man. Not yet. God hasn't blessed me with any yet.
Okay, because one of the things I was going to ask, if you did have kids, is if that, I guess, those leadership skills or the way that you go about being a leader, it kind of translated into that. But I guess that's besides the point then.
Well, not really, because I do have like my nieces and my nephews, and they're not my kids, but I still want to instill in them the same principles, right? So it kind of goes into that. Their youth. I have one nephew; he's actually with me now. He's visiting me for the summer, and I always, now's the time. He's 15 years old. I try to teach those same things. Like, he's very honest. I want him to keep that. He's very accountable. Right? He always says, "Hey, my bad." And those are the things that I want to instill, because as kids, you're curious, right? And I want everyone to maintain that. So my nieces, my nephews, when they mess up, if they break something, they're running around and something falls, I don't want to yell at them. I want to say, okay, how can this be a teaching moment? And I tell them, like, what happened? Make sure they say honest, be honest, right? I want them to feel like they can come to me, as I said with my soldiers, right? I always say, okay, that's okay, clean it up. Make sure we fix the mess first. And now we can come up with a solution, right? Solution may be, don't run in the house, right? So that's what we learn. And I think that too often, people are quick to yell at, kids, youth, or tell them to, like, kill their curiosity, kill that joy that being a kid brings, because it's an inconvenience, right? So I think we should all learn patience and kind of learn from those kids, right? Because a lot of us, as we get older, we lose that curiosity because we're afraid, right? That fear stops us from wanting to think outside the box, from wanting to be free and run around metaphorically, right? Run around in our minds and just try things. Right? We don't want to do that. We start to play it safe. So that's why, as a youth, I make sure that they keep that, because I want them to grow up and still have that same curiosity and that same free mind.
I respect that. Even though they're not your kids, you've taken that role to try and be pivotal in their development. That's something I respect a lot. And something else that kind of comes to mind from this is, we talked about, the effects of leadership on kids and such. And so just kind of reflecting on your upbringing and growing up, what are some of the things, or I guess lack of leadership abilities, that you may have seen, like, from the people that were around you, that affected you growing up, and that you might have either been able to work from or had to work against?
Sure. I mean, a lot to work against, because, when you grow up without your father as a young man, it's tough because you don't really have anyone teaching you how to become that man. Especially, growing up poor, you don't really have the ability to go to all these schools and private school and all this stuff and have mentors and all these other things. So as a youth, I found that I learned, I don't even, I can't even point to one person and be like, hey, they taught me how to be a man. But I think I just learned from how I wanted my sisters and my mom to be treated. Right. That's where I learned that from. The obstacles were, my mom always had to work. Right. So when me and my sister, my older sister, I always shout her out, because she pretty much raised me, even though she was only 3 years older than me. When we were younger, we would get home and we had to call my mother, like, hey, Mom, what's there to eat? And my mom would remember, like, hey, go into this cabinet and get this, get that. But my sister would cook. My sister, even when I was a baby, she would change my diapers, all that stuff. And I think that if it wasn't for her showing me that love, I would have never known what love was, because I didn't really feel it, right, in the household. I grew up actually in a polygamous household, right? My mom was the second wife, right? And then he had another wife. So he had two families. So that was difficult. Seeing that and trying to depict what that meant for me as a man, right? Is this what it means to how I'm supposed to treat women? Is it okay to have multiple women? Is it okay to just, have my wife serve me in a room when I come home and just go up in my room and stay there, right? I didn't really learn anything from him when it came to being a man. I can't say that I did, honestly. So I went out to the streets, right, and found people who maybe they had parents. They was my homeboys, right? So I would go over their house, stay over there. I would go to my aunt's house, even though my cousin James, I would look up to him, so I would go there. And I had an older brother, and my older brother, up until maybe I was about 7, we were real close, and then something changed in an instant mentally. I don't know what changed in him, but we lost that connection. So it always felt like, I would lose the people who meant something to me in my life, and I had to get over that. Right. So these are some of the challenges I experienced. And as you know, when you come up, in poverty and all these other things, the other obstacle that everyone faces is opportunities. You don't see that you have other opportunities outside of what's readily available: the drugs, the hustling, the gangbang, all those other things. That's readily available, but it's detrimental. But you don't know that coming up as a kid. So I went out, was arrested at 17, faced 7 years in prison because of that, because I didn't see any other option. And I didn't even care about myself, right? I didn't care enough about myself until I got locked up and had to see my mom and my sister come visit me, right? Seeing the pain in their face. That's the only thing that saved me. Was God said, this is your warning. This is your warning. All the things you said you didn't know, I'm teaching you in this moment. He taught me in that moment through jail, being behind those bars, not having control of my destiny because, the courts had me. Right? I was in the system now. I didn't have any control. And that's why I came up with that control your mindset, control your destiny. Because I knew what it felt like to be helpless. To say, hey, I'm in the system now. I'm about to get sent upstate, 7 years, 17 years old. I'm going with the big dogs now. Right? I'm with grown men now. That's what's going to happen. And I don't know what's going to happen to me, right? So I had to take all those lessons learned by God's grace. I got out after about a month, only because the victims didn't show and they didn't continue to press the charges. That's the only thing that got me off. And that from that point on, I said, hey, I'm going to be a servant of God, right? I'm no longer going to be that kid that didn't have a care in the world because I felt that I didn't have anything to offer the world. So that was a long way to say those are some of the things I learned, just coming up.
No, I got you. It all makes sense. And, I appreciate you sharing that story. Some of the things kind of stuck out to me from you telling it. And I just have some questions about that and relaying it back to that topic of leadership, right? What would you say, I guess, as far as the people that you had around you, what elements of leadership would you say you were lacking that led to you eventually getting to that point? Because one of the things that you said that caught my attention, I think it was something to the effect of like not seeing like the self-worth or like the value in yourself or something like that. And it led you to making some of these bad decisions. And we could touch on that a little bit because I feel like a lot of the guys that come from a similar background could probably relate to that, but it just isn't something that they maybe put their finger on yet.
Right. Okay. Yeah, for sure. And I think some of the things that were lacking was compassion. Compassion was one of the biggest things that lacked. Empathy really was lacking because, no one, coming up, a lot of people aren't taught that themselves. So how can they show it? They don't know how to display it. Right. I had a teacher tell me, in high school, he said, you look like you belong on a street corner somewhere. I didn't expect you to be so smart. That's a serious lack of empathy and compassion because you don't know my story. Right. I'm sitting here I'm in school trying to make something of myself, and to hear that, that could have derailed me completely. You don't know. But luckily I took it as like, yeah, I can do both. At the time I was like, yeah, I can do both. I can do everything. Right. I don't have to be confined in the box. And that was always my mentality. I can do what I want because I can make it happen just because I work hard. I'm a hustler mentality. I have, the mind. At that time, I didn't know what that meant. Right. It meant bad things at that time. Right. But now that I'm older, right, those same things that were lacking, the compassion and empathy, are huge focal points for me. Right. Those are the things I focus on in everything I do. Right. I make it an intentional point every day to say, I'm going to do something for someone else and expect nothing back, right? I'm going to do something for someone else to give and add value, because I think that is my purpose now. And that was shown because somehow I got here. Somehow I'm talking to you, like through everything. Somehow, without the compassion and empathy as a young youth, I was able to get here and be here today. That's blessings, so I got to pay that forward.
All right. And so something that, I guess, how do I word this? What it really makes me think about is that type of stuff that you're talking about, where like people are lacking the empathy or those skills to be able to relate to other people and to and really just to be, I guess, a light in somebody's life, or like a positive example, like in a way, somebody that can help build esteem. It seems like a lot of people lack those skills, especially in poverty. I feel like, because it seems like a lot of them come from like a scarcity mindset, I guess you can say. Like when you're living a life of scarcity, it's kind of hard to be the type of person that can, I guess, come outside of yourself and provide for others really in any way. Because when you're living a life of scarcity, you're so wrapped up in yourself and what you have going on and what your needs are, that it's rare that a lot of people look at others and say, how can I help them? And so I feel like that kind of relates to what you're talking about with not receiving the empathy and such from the people around you, because whenever people are coming from that place of lack, they're not even considering or thinking about, how is this affecting Jevon's confidence in himself, how he feels about himself, the environment that he's in right now. They're just worried about, okay, putting some food on the table or something like that.
Right. 100%. And you hit it right in the head. That scarcity mindset. When you think success is finite, you like you said, you're not worried about someone else getting success because you don't want them taking a piece of your pie. Right. So a lot of times they don't want to show you the skills that they know. They don't want to share the information of how they got there. They don't want to be like, hey, let me take this person under my wing without wanting something from them. That whole mentorship concept that didn't exist unless it was you were trying to be on a block and they tried to make you do some work for them, right? So that whole mentorship thing I really didn't hear that until I was an adult. I really never knew what that meant. So those are the things that really play a big point in why it's hard to get out of those situations. Why it's hard to grow. You talk about the growth mindset. Why it's hard to get that growth mindset? Because if you've never seen it, you don't even really know what it is, right? You don't know what it feels like. You don't know how to get it, how to obtain it. And you probably, even if you've seen it or heard it, you think it's bull, right? You're like, that doesn't work, right? That sounds like some stuff. I'm just heard the same thing, that's the mentality you hear, right? So instead of wanting to invest in yourself, you feel better just staying in that comfort zone. So I always tell people, like, do something each day to be uncomfortable, because that's the only way you're going to grow. If you don't have a growth mindset now, if you don't do something that's uncomfortable, you keep being content and all you're doing is complaining, you'll stay right there. Matter of fact, you're probably going to regress, because eventually you're going to get tired of being the same. And if you don't have the mentality to move forward, where do you go? You retreat. Backward. That's it.
When I was first talking about the scarcity mindset and like people choosing whether or not to serve others, at first I was really thinking about on like the emotional level, but when you brought up the success portion of it, that makes sense too. And I agree with everything that you said. Like at first when I was talking about it, I was more so going along the lines of like, I remember how you talked about the self-worth and everything, and how it might be hard for the people around you to help provide that nurturing that kids need in that type of way, in the emotional way. But then you also brought up the success portion of it as far as like, opportunities and things. And that's a good point too, because especially if you haven't seen a lot of examples around you for what success is or how to get there. Like you said, you might think it's a finite thing, a zero-sum game where you have to have people who have it and people who are have-nots. And so as a result, people that are coming up in those environments may not reach out to others to try and help them. So I think that was a good point as well.
Right.
Just all of it overall.
Yeah. And like you said, man, to tie it all together, like you said, it's a whole thing. It's holistic, right? If you have that scarcity mindset, it bleeds into every aspect of your life, right? There's not one thing you're going to do in a growth level. It's not one thing because you're not your higher self yet, right? Because you're always thinking that this is going to be taken away from me, right? I have to hoard it. I have to hold on to it, right? Or you have the opposite. If you have money, right, you're like, oh man, it's burning a hole in my pocket. You hear that saying a lot, right? I got to do something with it. I got to blow it, right? This ain't meant for me. No, and that's how we stay down, right? That's how you stay down because of that. And you don't look to get the information to change that. Emotionally, that's probably the worst because when you're emotionally scarce, you can't understand love. You can't understand when someone's actually genuinely trying to help you. So everything is suspect to you, right? Everyone that comes to you, like, what's their agenda? And the agenda may be just like, hey, they seen something in you. I was like that when I was young, right? I thought I was like this monster, right? Like, I come out here, I do what I got to do, but I don't want to deal with no one. I'm pushing everyone away. And that's what happens when you're in that scarcity mindset emotionally. Right? You just push everyone away. You actually sabotage your relationship. You might do it subconsciously, but like, oh, this person's too good. I can't, or I'm just going to I'm going to hurt them. If something does happen, you want to hurt that person back, right? Stuff like that. So you never really get to experience love because you can't love yourself enough to invest in growing.
It's a tough way to live. And you could even say that in some cases, people might feel like they almost don't deserve the treatment that they might be getting from somebody, which is why they think that it has to be fake. It's like they think that there's nothing about them that makes them worthy enough to have somebody actually paying attention to them or seeing potential in them. And it's really so sad. It's the saddest thing to go through life like that, thinking, pretty much looking over your shoulder, being skeptical about everybody just because your self-worth is so low that you don't think it's possible for somebody to see something in you or to love you or to genuinely care about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you preaching today, brother. You preaching today, man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I mean, because the thing is, to a degree, I can relate to it. Yeah, maybe not necessarily from like people like in my neighborhood around me, because I didn't grow up like in the hood. We didn't have a lot of money. We were like maybe I would say like lower middle class or something like that. And so we were doing well enough, but that doesn't mean that some of those same, I guess, personality traits and things, you can't still be prevalent like within your family, even though people may not be poor. And so I can kind of relate in a similar way to where even with family, you're kind of worried or wondering, whether or not somebody has your best interest in mind, and you have to kind of look out for yourself in a way. And so I can relate to that.
Yeah. And it's a thing we see constantly. And when you don't even realize it, if you don't realize it, how can you do anything about it? If that's all that you've known, you're going to think that's fine. And I kind of spoke to it earlier, like, how did I know what love was when I was talking about it's the same thing with this, right? That scarcity mentality, you don't know anything's wrong until it's called out or you have an epiphany somehow. The only reason why I'm able to talk to you today about it is because I was curious, right? That childhood curiosity kicked in. I was like, yeah, how come Jay-Z, he came from a similar type of environment. Why am I seeing him on TV? Right? What did he do differently? Nas, what are they doing? The same people I was listening to, I'm like, what did they do differently? Where I'm here and they're right there. So I started doing the research. Like, how can I get there? I don't want to be a rapper. Like, I had my little time where I wanted to be a rapper. I ain't gonna but what I'm saying is like it's possible. Like, we have information in our hands. We are in the best stage of existence to change things if we really want to. We can literally Google something. Say, how did that happen? Google, right? We can literally go to a library and there's a plethora of books on the same subject we're curious about. So there's opportunity here, and you can create opportunities. So in order to get out of the scarcity mindset, that's probably what you're going to have to do, right? In order to say, I don't like where I'm at, I'm going to change it. You have to be willing to put in the work and create the opportunities, right? I had to say to myself, like, I'm tired of that. I'm tired of being broke. I'm tired of like doing things, the negative way where I got to look over my shoulder. I want to do things legit. And I also want to bring my peoples with me, right? I want to bring my best friend with me. I want to bring my family with me. I don't want to just, that's my definition of success, right? For everyone around me to be successful and to not have to worry anymore. To generationally say, hey, my nieces and nephews don't have to worry about where the money is going to come from if they choose to start a business, start a trade, or go to college. So you have to understand first your why. Why are you trying to change? And then find out how, right? How can I get out of this scarcity mentality? How can I get out of the emotional state where I don't trust people and I don't even love myself? Why and how are going to be the two most powerful questions. And then you can go to what. What do I want? What do I get out of it? What does success look like? All those things. But start with the why and the how first.
I'll tell you the way it happened for me was really just changing my environment. And it wasn't even like something that I did consciously, because in a way, I didn't even realize what my issue was in life until I started to move away from it, because it was really all I knew. I thought that's how life was. I didn't realize how dysfunctional the mindset that I had was, or how dysfunctional the people were around me, until I had to spend time around people who were more on the normal end of the spectrum every day. And that was when I went off to school. And so I was watching a video about this. I forgot what the concept is called. That was like the overarching thing for it. But you know how they say the saying where like a bad apple spoils the whole bunch, but they have another saying where it's a bad barrel spoils all of the apples in the bunch, meaning like whatever environment all the apples are in can spoil them. And so
I like that. I never heard that one.
Yeah, that was the first time I heard it too. And so the thing is, the barrel that I was in changed in a way. Before, the environment that I was in, I guess you kind of say that it was to the point where to survive with hurt, dysfunctional people, you kind of had to pick up hurt, dysfunctional tendencies as defense mechanisms in a way, to be able to maneuver and navigate and get yours in that type of environment. Right. But the thing is, I take on that same, toxic mindset, and I go to a clean, healthy barrel, which was college. I'm around people in different organizations that have healthy family dynamics, that have healthy friendships, and they're looking at me and the stuff I'm doing like what's wrong with this guy? And so that was the first time something like that had ever happened. And so that's when I really had to start doing some self-reflection. That was also around the time when I really started doing personal development, where, people that I come across had recommended books. And that was really when I started to kind of see just how much like my mindset and my environment had been holding me back in my development, who I was as a man. And so that was really the main change. And I would say it even got to the point to where, I started to become a good apple in a way. And the changes in me drove away a lot of those bad apples from my past, to where they didn't want to be involved with me anymore. And it's just kind of crazy to think about, reflecting back on it and using that analogy. But that's just kind of something I wanted to throw into it, because I felt like it was relevant to what you were saying.
Oh, 100%, man. And thank you for that, sharing that quote, that analogy, because I had never heard that. And that is so true, right? You always hear product of my environment, right? But you can change that. You don't have to be a product of your environment. You could be a product of your efforts, right? And that's what you did. You said, I'm not going to be a product of my environment. I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm going to learn things that I can change, because I knew something was wrong, right?
Right.
I knew something, but you had to be honest with yourself to say that. Like, I don't, something's not right. This isn't what I was looking for. This is what I want. Right? You have to be honest with yourself. And a lot of people don't want to be, because the truth hurts.
Yeah.
Especially when you're truthful with yourself.
Yeah. People don't want to acknowledge that what they do might be wrong, or like stuff, the ways that they operate might be bad. Yeah. And I had to look at myself and say, these are bad things that you used to partake in, what you used to do, as far as like how you navigated socially. You had a bunch of antisocial tendencies that won't serve you well in the long run. I had to, I guess, get rid of my ego and look at myself and see what the wrong was, what the bad stuff was. And I had to make a choice. Really, you really only have a few options in that type of situation. When you're in your environment,
Right.
you know the environment is bad. You either play the game, because as long as you're in it, that's the only way you can survive. Two, don't play the game, but stay in the environment and get eaten alive, because that's what's going to happen if you don't adapt to the rules of the game that you're in. It's gonna tear you apart. All the other players
Right.
that are experts in that game are going to tear you apart. Or option three, which is to leave and join a new game. And that was what I had to do. But to do that, you have to see what the differences were between that one and the old one that you're in, and make the changes.
Right. And I have to say, man, all of your listeners, I'm sure they listen to you and they would be like, wow, like the changes you made, that option three, they look at you today and they're going to be like, man, I need to do that. I'm sure you've motivated a lot of people to make that change, because the man I'm speaking to now is polished, right? You are like, you exude. That's why I was excited to do this. I'm like, man, this young man is like, you exude confidence, you exude like passion for what you're doing, right? And you're professional, right? So like all those things, to say you came from that and you took it upon yourself to say, I'm moving. I know something's not right, and I'm going to acknowledge my toxicity, right? I'm going to acknowledge the things I need to work on, and I'm going to acknowledge my part in what I played, And then you said, I'm taking that accountability and I'm putting it into action. I'm not just going to talk about it, because a lot of people say, oh, they'll admit they were wrong, but then they don't change, right? The change is really hard. And there's 6 steps to change, right? And really the first step is pre-contemplation, where you're resistant to change. And that's where a lot of people stay. And that's where we hear, that's just the way I am, because they're resistant to change. And those are the people that you're probably wasting your breath with if you try to give them information to help them change, So someone like you're willing to change. And that's one of the things that a lot of people have to learn, right? Being willing to change, right? Not being stuck in your way. Like you said, getting rid of that ego, because you're not going to grow. First I'm going to say this: change is hard, but being the same is harder, right? Because the world around you and the people around you are constantly in a state of metamorphosis. So if you're struggling and you're resisting against that, and you're staying the same, and that's what you're doing, you're really regressing, you're really going backwards, right? Because everything else is moving forward and you're doing this, right? So you're getting past, Jay-Z said, start off fast, wheezing in the back. That's what you're doing, right? You're staying the same, and that's painful. So you might as well go ahead and identify which way you want to change, because you can change in a negative, or you can change and move forward.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. And, I hope that you're right, that the stuff that I'm doing is inspiring people to make change in their life. And plus, I would think that this type of content that we make, this personal development type content, just further enforces that change is actually possible. Because like you said, for a lot of those people, they aren't able to acknowledge the fact that it is possible to change. And honestly, that could just be them taking it as a default because it's easier, I guess mentally, because to acknowledge the change is possible, you have to acknowledge that there's something wrong in what you're doing. And like you said, a lot of people don't want to do that, especially in those environments that we talk about where someone's coming up in poverty. Think about how it makes somebody feel to know, hey, and the reason why you're 30, 40, 50 years old and still in poverty is all because there were decisions that you could have made that you didn't make, as opposed to, oh, someone else is holding you in this, or life is unfair and that's why you have to remain poor. It's a lot easier to say, oh, it's some other circumstances leading to me being here, not my choices at the end of the day. And people will rather hold on to that and live miserably because it protects that ego.
Man, you are saying a word, brother. Powerful. That's powerful.
I study, I study this stuff, it's important to me. And so, if I'm going to come on here and take that responsibility of having a platform, I at least need to make sure to a degree that I know what I'm talking about. I'll say to a degree, I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
So that's important stuff.
No, it's really important, because that's that accountability, man. As long as it's someone else's issue, as long as someone else caused it, it's fine that I'm in this position. How is that logical? Right? How is that logical? As human beings, we like to believe that we're rational.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to become rational, you actually have to train yourself for rationality, because we are typically irrational, right? Our thinking goes from emotion to action, right? There's really no thought. It's just automatic, because the mind is trained to try to analyze everything that's happening in milliseconds, probably faster than that, right? So sometimes we short circuit and we make the wrong choice. But if you take time to say, all right, this is on me, and then you take time and take the emotion like, oh man, I don't like it here, this is terrible, that emotion, and you say, okay, let me see how I can do it. That thought needs to go in there before you take action or inaction, right? And a lot of people miss that thought process. A lot of people just have the emotion and then they go like, oh man, this sucks. Okay, what are you doing about it? Right? You're just
Right.
sitting there, sitting back complaining because they said it was someone else that caused it, right? Oh, someone needs to come help us. Someone needs to speak up. Well, what about you? When do you say, all right, what's my part that I play in this? It goes back to that extreme ownership thing I was thinking. Like, yes, it's possible that you're in a situation that is caused because of things you cannot control. But what about the parts you can control? You can control a couple of things. You can control your mindset, you can control your emotions, and you can control your effort, right? Sure, we can't control the outcomes all the time, right? The outcome is not necessarily in our hands, but you don't focus on the outcomes. You focus on the effort you're putting into it each day. And I guarantee you're going to be better for it, right? Because even if you fail, you're succeeding because you're taking action. And a lot of us are afraid of failure, and that's ingrained in us. Failure is bad. You get that F on your paper, everyone's laughing. But failure is not bad. Failure is a part of success. It's actually better to say, yes, I've tried 100 times and I failed 100 times, but I'm going to try 101, than to say, man, I thought about this. This would have been a good idea. And now I'm laying on my deathbed and I regret it because I never tried. Which one would you rather do, right? And you have to think about that when you're sitting on an idea, when you're saying like, oh, I want to try this. Go for it. Don't be afraid to fail. Success is insulated by failure.
There's a saying that just reminded me of when you were talking about that. And it was kind of a response that somebody gave to someone that was making fun of this guy because he had failed or because he had lost or whatever it was he was doing. But he looks at the person, he says, lost? What I lost, you never had. And I kind of thought about that, and I was thinking, he makes a good point. The freedom, I guess, that he gained of being able to do whatever it was he did, being able to get out of his head and actually go out there and try it. That's the win right there, really. And the person making fun of him for not reaching whatever the end goal was, he realized that person never even gave themselves the opportunity to achieve it in the first place. At least he knows it's not for them, it's not for him, because he went and did the effort and it didn't manifest for him. But this person never even gave themselves the opportunity. They never even had the chance to lose because they were a coward. And
right.
that's kind of something I've always thought about whenever I've been in a spot where, I was worried about failure or, what people might say. Whatever I lose in work, podcasting, whatever it is, they never even had in the first place.
And that's so true, man. And a lot of times, we have to think about that, right? When you're listening to someone, ask yourself, have they done it? How are they, how do they have a right to even say anything? Because chances are the people you're listening to, they have not done it themselves. They have not went out there and tried and went for something themselves. Right. So you also have to make sure, like, the people you're surrounding yourself, the people whose opinion actually matters to you, you have to make sure those people are people you should be listening to in the first place. And I think that I love what you said there. I think that kind of ties into that, right? A lot of times we get defeated and deflated by what someone else is saying. But really, your heart should speak louder. If your heart wants to try it, go for it, right? At least you can say, I went for it and I gave it a chance. And I'm not just saying like go out there and give it the college try, half-assing it. I'm talking about actually go for it. Actually put the effort in it takes to succeed. I started a YouTube channel a few months back, probably like 4 months now. And I don't get that many views. But guess what? I'm going to keep going because my heart said I should do this, right? My heart said I should put this out there. And I'm enjoying the process of making the videos, editing. Now, I'm not the best, right? But I don't care. I don't care what people say. You know, people might watch it and be like, oh, this editing sucks, you know? But guess what? I don't care because I'm putting it out there. I'm putting in the effort, right? To do what my heart told me to do, what I feel is my purpose, what I feel I'm going to enjoy from now. And that's what I think a lot of people need to just start living, right? Live. That's why I named my company Live, Not Loathe, because I want people to just start living, not just be alive, not just breathing, you know, actually going out there and doing things and get that joy back in your life. You know, get that understanding, get that curiosity, be a kid in your life, you know, learn, grow, have some fun, do all those things. I think it's so important because a lot of us just going through checking off boxes in our life, you know, hitting some goals that don't even mean anything to us anymore. We forgot why we even wanted those goals in the first place. They're just false objectives because they don't matter anymore. They don't align with our values. So people, the listeners, go out there, realize life is short and you need to bring back the joy if you don't have any. Find out what that means for you. Find out what success is and find out what your values are so you can actually live, not loathe.
That was beautiful. I like that, man. And pretty much what it sounds like you're telling them is just to live freely and live authentically.
Yes.
Do what it is that works for you and do it freely without any fear of judgment, failure, or anything else. Because really at the end of the day, what would be the point in living if you don't do those things?
Exactly. And that's the problem today. Like no one, you know, a lot of people don't know the point of living. And that's why we have such high, you know, issues with self-esteem, have high suicide rates. We have high mental illness rates because that point of living is a myth. And as humans, we search for understanding. And if you don't have the understanding for yourself, you're going to be chasing someone else's understanding. And it's not going to make sense for you. So you have to find your own meaning.
Do you feel like your development as a leader, as you started to get more proficient in that type of stuff, led to you eventually living a more free and authentic life?
100%, 100%, man. You know, like I think being a leader or being, even being someone like under someone who's a great leader, you know, I think that it kind of gives you, it helps you find that path, you know, and I think that I was really grateful for that being open to me, you know, my eyes being open to the seeing, you know, just learning, like as I train people or as someone trained me or something like that, just that path just became a little clearer every step, you know. I think that hopefully everyone gets that. I'm sure you probably can relate to something like that as well.
Yeah, I would say so. Like doing the leadership development back when I was in college, those skills that you learn and pretty much having to implement them, it kind of gets you out of your comfort zone in a way. It makes it to where you get more comfortable being in a spot to where you can be scrutinized, or, you know, people can pinpoint little stuff about you because you can't pay attention to everything. And so one thing I'll say is that from taking charge in those different areas and being forced to be a leader, it got to the point where I developed thicker skin and became more comfortable with myself, which eventually led to me being able to live more authentically, where I could get criticism here or there and I wouldn't take it personally. I wouldn't feel like it was an attack on who I was. You know, most of the time it was subjective anyway, and I would say, okay, that's just their opinion. But I'll definitely say that as I worked consciously to develop myself into a better leader, it definitely correlated with me being able to live more freely and live more authentically, you know, just because of the confidence and knowing that from the results that you see, because, you know, it doesn't lie whenever you're in charge of other people, who you are and like how far you are in your development, it's going to show and how those people respond to you.
100%, 100%. And I think that one of the keys you said was listening. When someone gave you criticism, you listened, but you found the jewels in it, right? Some of the things you're like, that's crap, but you were willing to listen so you can get the jewels and apply it as you saw fit. And that's probably why you were able to take the leadership skills and live more authentically and freely, because you didn't care about everything they said. You cared about what really, really mattered and what really was relevant. right? What wasn't the subjective pieces that you could really apply to life? And that's what a lot of people don't hear, right? They hear someone talking about them, or they hear the negatives and they're like, tune it out. I think the active listening piece is something that a lot of us are missing these days. And I think that if people really listen for understanding instead of listening to respond, they will catch those jewels too, and they'll be a lot further along when it comes to living like freely and authentically.
That's a tough skill to learn.
It is.
You know,
It is.
It's a tough skill. I've even had
is.
to work on honing that while I've done this. But yeah, you're right. If we could listen to understand instead of always listening to respond, it would definitely help, because I'll say getting into that habit of maybe not always trying to say, oh, why I think this criticism or feedback is wrong on their part. Right. Me just getting into the habit of listening made it to where I could ask myself, why did they say this? Yep. Even though I may not necessarily think it's true, I wanted to know why that came to mind and why it was something that they felt the need to say to me, and getting past my ego of having to let them know that they're wrong or whatever, just being able to sit with it. That was a process too. But I would definitely say that was one of the more valuable skills that I was able to learn, being able to take something that somebody says and not feel the need to prove myself or whatever in that moment, but to take it and actually try and empathize, put myself in their shoes and try and look at it from their lens and say, what was it about this experience where, even whether I agree with it or not, can make them see this flaw in my leadership.
Yeah, no, I love that. Personal development is lifelong learning, right? So we're always going to be trying to get better at it, but the key is we're actually going for it. Right? We're actually putting in the work, putting in the effort, right? And you've seen, we've both seen the benefits of that. Just putting in effort. You don't know exactly how to do everything, but we just go out there and do what we think is best, and it's been paying dividends.
Yeah, definitely. I'll say that if it had been for the personal development that I started doing when I was in college, I definitely wouldn't be in the career I'm in today or have a podcast, and I probably have a much more stressful life. So I'm definitely grateful for it.
Indeed. Same here, bro. Same here, man.
Yeah, well, that pretty much wraps everything up. And so just to give the audience some information about you, if they like to find you, where could they go if they want to find more information? And also, if they like to find your book?
Sure. So if you want to connect with me, I'm on social media, all platforms at Live Not Loathe. That's LIVENOTLOATHE. My website is livenotloathe.com/ownyourkingdom. And then you can get the book, pre-order. It's available for pre-order probably for a couple more weeks, because it's on its way out. By the time the podcast is released, it might actually be on the bookshelves. But you can get that at ownyourkingdom.com.
All right. Well, thank you again for coming on to the show, Jevon. I think we offered a lot of value to the listeners. And hey, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Kamani, same here. Keep doing what you're doing, King. I appreciate everything you're putting out, and I can't wait to go back and listen to all the other episodes and the ones coming out, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, then take care.
All right, take care, brother.